Good afternoon, everyone. We are now going to zoom out and look at the issues of safety of journalists from the position of the Council of Europe. Today, we're having the session marking the UK launch of the platform to promote the protection of journalism and safety of journalists. So this report for 2026 is the annual report prepared by the member coalition, of which actually the Justice for Journalists is also one of the members. This is the coalition of 15 civil society organizations that look into the threats to media across the member states and monitors the progress in addressing these concerns. The platform remains a functioning mechanism of accountability within the Council of Europe. For the past 12 years, it documents threats, tracks state responses, and keeps press freedom firmly on the political agenda. In that sense, it stands as evidence that international legal framework still mattered, and it still works. At a time when it has become almost fashionable to speak about the weakening of international law, or even to suggest that the states are quietly stepping away from the European Convention on Human Rights, this report tells a bit of different story. We will open the discussion with our distinguished panel, which I will introduce. Next to me is William Horsley, co-founder and director, international director of Center for Freedom of the Media. Felicity Garvey, UK Advocacy Officer for the Reporters Without Borders, and Jamie Wiseman, Senior Europe Advocacy Officer for International Press Institute. We will open with Jamie's presentation about the work that the organization, his organization, had done to cover the issues of media capture and the matters that are important for public interest journalism. Thank you, Jamie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, we've only got 20 minutes, so I'm going to keep it relatively short and hopefully sweet. Yeah, as we've said, this is the 10th year of the platform, the Council of Europe's platform for the safety of journalists. During that time, we've produced 6 annual reports. The report was launched on Tuesday in Brussels. I was there as well to launch that one, and it's very happy to be here to kind of present some of the key findings as well. These alerts that we add to the platform, it's not a picture of every single media freedom violation in these states, but the most serious ones, which we see as the state having a responsibility to respond, either because the state is the perpetrator itself of the press freedom violations, or states have a responsibility to follow up, to launch investigations and to bring justice for these attacks or these pressures. So I'll just do a kind of very brief summary of the findings, and then indeed I'll talk about the key themes in media capture, foreign agent laws, and very quickly surveillance. So the state we've seen this year, in 2025, just gone, with the most alerts on the platform was Turkey, with 49. Well, we've seen the continued weaponization of particularly anti-terrorism and insult and defamation laws to silence what remains of the remaining independent media within the country. And then tied in second place are Serbia and Georgia, which are 2 key flashpoints in the region right now. And then Ukraine is the country with the 4th largest number of alerts. But that's more Russian attacks, particularly drone strikes, which has seen the killing of 3 journalists in Ukraine in the past year. So it looks at these big issues of safety, impunity, detentions, arrests of journalists, but having sat through the last 2 days, so many of the topics that have been discussed, we also look at in the report, from transnational repression, which we heard about on the first day, slaps as well, and also the threats facing journalists in conflict zones. We have a thematic chapter which looks specifically at the evolution of drone warfare and how this has shifted what is previously considered to be the front line and the safe zone for journalists to operate in. So it's a really good summary, I think, of everything we've heard in the last few days about the threats facing journalists. But I'll just quickly do 3 key findings, which we maybe don't see as much here in the UK, but around Europe are key trends which I think we want to highlight. So the first is this kind of spread of foreign agent laws following the Russian model. In recent years, these laws have been passed or attempted to be passed in countries including Republika Srpska, the territory in Bosnia-Herzegovina. In Slovakia, a similar transparency in foreign agent law was attempted to be passed and only then watered down after considerable pressure from the EU. In Hungary last year, the government of Prime Minister Viktor Orban attempted, or at least brought before Parliament, a very restrictive bill, which if passed would have allowed for the blacklisting and even the closure of media outlets that receive foreign funds. And just a couple of days ago in Georgia, a very restrictive package of laws was passed by the Georgian Dream-dominated parliament, which dramatically expands what is understood as a grant to civil society, to human rights organizations, but also to media. So anyone who falls foul of this law can now face criminal sanction and fines within the country. So a key finding there is that it's not like these laws contain the word foreign agent. They're instead focused on foreign funding and grants. But the aim is the same, which is to slice off independent media from international support, donors, and funding. Another key finding looks at surveillance and spyware in particular. When we think of surveillance, we think of NSO, Pegasus. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, but in Europe, there is a vibrant spyware for hire industry, which is thriving and has multiple clients. These are companies which are selling their technology to governments, ostensibly for anti-terrorism and investigating serious crimes, which in many cases have been abused to surveil human rights defenders and, of course, journalists. In the report, we look at two key cases this year, which is Serbia, where Pegasus was used to attempt to surveil two journalists from the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, BIRN, who I'm sure many of you may have read in the past. And in Italy, we've seen the targeted surveillance using graphite, another, maybe lesser-known spyware tool to surveil journalists from Fanpage and their an investigative media outlet. One positive example quickly on surveillance is that last week in Greece, a court in Athens handed down a guilty verdict to 4 executives at a spyware for hire firm called Intellexa, which is one of the most well-known in the world. And each of these members of the company was sentenced to at least 8 years in prison for their role in selling and using their spyware to surveil at least 80 people in Greece, including journalists. And this is thought to be the first case anywhere in the world where the executives of a spyware for hire company are now going to be facing jail. So that it is possible, as we see, to get justice in these cases, but very hard. I'll end it there just with a plea. We put a lot of work into this report, so if you're a journalist, please look at it, cite it, reference it, report on these cases around Europe. If you're a human rights organization, a media freedom advocacy group, use it as a tool for your campaigns, for your advocacy. The data is there. If you're an international organization, raise these cases with states where you possibly can. And also, as William might talk about, we've seen a dramatic decrease in the responses of states to the alerts that we add to the platform. So please respond and be part of this process of accountability that the platform offers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. For those interested, there's a QR code and you can access both the platform's webpage but also the report. Felicity, I would like to turn to you. From the perspective of your organization, what are the most urgent issues that this report covers?
Yes, hello. So in the interest of time, I'll try not to duplicate too much of what Jamie's already said. And also what we already know in the room, we already know that 2025 has been a year of global and globalized threats. We've seen defenders of press freedom turn into its enemies. From Reporters Without Borders' perspective, 2025 was actually the first year that our World Press Freedom Index classified global press freedom as being in a difficult situation. Practically speaking, that means that less than 1% of the world's population lives in a country where press freedom is actually classified as good. This report is titled On the Tipping Point. And I think I want to start with saying that that's not rhetorical. I think it's fair to say that the pressures that this report documents are showing a system that is trying to absorb more pressure than it can truly bear. What Jamie's already brought up, speaking about the sharing of surveillance, speaking about spyware. We can clearly tell that these pressures are not stopping at national borders. And so I'm going to pick up initially with just some of the findings on transnational repression. This report highlights that there's at least 1,500 exiled journalists working across nearly 70 outlets in the region. These are, while far from exclusively the only targets of TNR, they are very often targeted by it. The UK, which, by the way, is still a member state of the platform, is home to significant diaspora media. We have journalists who are working tirelessly right now to cover what's going on with Iran and who are facing acute threats and surveillance and harassment right here in London just for doing their jobs. The report more broadly highlights Russia, Belarus, and Azerbaijan as particular offenders in terms of the sort of transnational prosecution of exiled journalists in absentia. Slaps are another tactic of transnational oppression, but also, of course, a broader threat to journalists in their own right. The transposition of the EU anti-slap directive is on the 7th of May, so this will be the last Council of Europe report without member states all having the anti-slap laws on their books. At the moment, at least 17 member states have initiated the implementation of the directive. However, progress is mixed. For instance, the Maltese law would not have protected Daphne Caruana Galizia were she alive today, as most of the cases that she faced were domestic rather than cross-border. In addition to these now unfortunately familiar legal threats and TNR tactics, I'd also like to flag that 2025 saw two of the platform partners, JFJ and Reporters Without Borders, officially be added to Russia's undesirable organization list, demonstrating, I think, further criminalization of press freedom. Exiled journalists are absolutely essential in the global information ecosystem. Without them, we'd all be facing the information black holes that authoritarian governments are trying to enforce at home. In the UK, we've got the Working Group on Tackling Transnational Repression, which Reporters Without Borders is on the steering committee of. It's making some progress in the advocacy space, but really our experiences with that work and with this report make it absolutely clear that we need the governments of member states to do much, much more. We need to see visa pathways, emergency protective measures, support for relocation, safety planning, and systemic cooperation with civil society. Europe can't just be a host to exiled journalism, it must commit to continuing to protect that exiled journalism. Another area of the report I'd also like to touch upon is the threats faced by women journalists. This is actually the first year that the report has a specific section on gendered threats, and this section is very timely. Compared with previous data, women journalists in 2025 are considerably more exposed to physical attacks, threat to life and safety, and verbal harassment. The figures are sobering reading, with 87% of women journalists surveyed experiencing online violence directly linked to their reporting in the last year. 87%. We already heard a powerful intervention from Dr. Pizzetti earlier today, describing sexualized weaponization of AI, the effect on mental health, the escalation from online violence to offline attacks. And I am afraid to say that the findings in this report only corroborate the dire picture that she painted earlier. The analysis of the platform's alerts show a distinct pattern of targeting, obstruction, and attacks against women journalists, including by state security forces in Europe, in the context of covering public events. This violence aims to push women out. When we talk about women journalists, or indeed BAME, LGBTQ+, refugee journalists, other groups, the importance of fighting back against these threats and this violence isn't just rooted in it being some sort of moral choice. It's because these are the voices that we cannot afford to lose from the industry, who bring new information, new perspectives to public debate. Abuse, meanwhile, is trying to reshape newsrooms. Reporters withdraw. Some move to less visible beats. Some leave the profession entirely. Member States' action plans, therefore, as this report recommends, need to include gender-responsive measures, better evidence capture, protocols for restraining orders, and assistance for raising complaints with digital platforms as well. Targeted harassment, be it gender-based or from TNR, cannot continue to be normalized as a fundamental part of the job of journalism. Treating it as inevitable, which so many often do, and we've seen this in terms of the difficulty of gathering data and getting people to self-report, treating it as inevitable simply accelerates the attrition from the profession, and then so too does it accelerate the attrition of reliable information. Journalists across Europe, through different mechanisms, are being pushed into silence by design, essentially, rather than accident. As Jamie already touched upon, the accountability gap is obviously a huge issue. Fewer than 1 in 3 alerts on the platform received a state response last year. Only 20% of the alerts since 2015 have been resolved. I think we're perhaps in a little bit of an echo chamber, so it's safe to say that we all agree in this room that this gap absolutely has to close. But we also need to push more towards concerted and practical action and really looking at how we can implement recommendations on reports exactly like this. If we're going to call 2025 a tipping point, I think we really need to be looking at 2026 as a turning point. There is, as this report makes very clear, far too much at stake. I think I'll call it there and give William time for his piece as well. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Felicity and Jamie, for bringing up these important issues. Now we turn to William to talk about the political dimension and how this report and this initiative in general is challenging the narrative of international law being in retreat. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. I'm speaking today actually as the Association of European Journalists, one of the partners. And I've got 4 points to share with you about the nature and purpose and successes and otherwise of this enterprise. First, it's a unique kind of accountability mechanism. This has never been done before. This is a kind of hybrid creature, a kind of unicorn or a griffon. It's something which is bringing together the civil society and stakeholder side together with the government. So often that's really quite a chasm which we have gulfed. So the platform came about as a result of a cultural revolution to which I was witness for the last 15 years, away from the arid question of putting out standard-setting texts to one about implementing those standards and texts in a proactive way with the support of civil society. It's a real breakthrough. And that's based on basically the legal concept of the positive obligations of states, particularly on preventing attacks against known threats to journalists, and also to tackle impunity, so quick and effective investigations. And that gives the basis for the idea of creating states' obligation to create a safe and enabling environment, and that's where this whole hinterland comes from. So, 2, does it work? Well, of course, 2,300 alerts, 15 organizations, this is impressive. In terms of the results, Jamie mentioned the number of responses, written responses from states has dipped below 50% this year. This is not good enough. Above all, the stubbornly low rate of only 20% of alerts actually verified over the whole period of now 11 years. This is not acceptable. So we're going to push that very, very hard. One success is the creation, I think, driven by the success of the platform, of this journalist safety campaign, Journalists Matter, bringing together, it's an all of society thing, trying to bring in all the stakeholders, raise awareness about the essential nature for society of producing a safe environment for journalists. So many of the states, nearly half, have produced their own national committees, like the UK did very early on, and a lot have got actual proper national action plans. Number 3, the platform is a powerful expression of faith by these organizations in the European Convention system, and therefore a rejection of the idea that international law is past its time. The Council of Europe has, on that basis, stimulated other European institutions, the European Union in particular, to take on board many of its own initiatives on the safety of journalists, on anti-slaps and other things. The Council of Europe was very quick to expel Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. Michael O'Flaherty, the Commissioner for Human Rights, was quick, and the UK should have listened to him when he put out a note saying that the banning of Palestine action did not meet the required legal requirements, for example. Number 4, the recommendations and looking ahead. Our first requirement is for, of course, states in good faith to respond properly and, above all, to put in the means within their governments to find the necessary remedial actions. And in these action plans, just in the last year, you've had successes from Albania, Portugal, and Luxembourg, for example, in that area. But beyond that, we want two points. One is political leadership at the highest level. We have a group of friends, up to 18, and that's a good sign. 18 member states want to be a member of the group of friends of safety of journalists. And behind the scenes, we want them to exert peer pressure within the Committee of Ministers on Greece over the unsolved murder of Georgios Karaivas many years, on Turkey for keeping in detention Osman Kavala for 6 years. These things should be unacceptable in modern Europe. The final word, really, I think, should go to the Azeri journalist who spoke at the Brussels event just on Tuesday this week. She said, solidarity of the institutions and countries of Europe should be concrete and bold for journalists under pressure. If ignored, it will be not only populations in countries like Azerbaijan that suffer, but the whole European framework of human rights will be in danger.
Thank you very much, William, for a very powerful statement and for reminding that the platform is not just a monitoring tool. It's a political commitment to uphold standards. Unfortunately, we don't have time. We only had 20 minutes, and we've managed to be efficient. So we will pass the floor to the next session.